Welcome back to another episode of yours truly, Trisha.
And Emil.
Today we are talking about, actually, we're going to get into it a little bit, not a full-blown deep dive into this topic, but I think it's important for us to touch on it to start because I think there's a lot to unpack around toxic parenting. Have you heard about the term? Are you familiar with the term? We know of a lot of friends, not mentioning any names, who experience toxic parenting, not themselves, but from their parents, or I guess the grandparents now. And I think it's important discussion to have on here because I think we're very much in the sandwich generation. So sandwich generation is when someone like ourselves having to raise a young family and also take care or have aging parents or elderly parents. It's also a hot topic culturally, I think. Filipinos out there, I'm sure you might be familiar with the term toxic parenting.
Sure. But culturally, yes. I think
But it happens in a lot of cultures.
It happens in a lot of cultures and it happens across the board. We happen to know some Filipinos that experience this, so that's why we can speak to it.
Yes.
Firsthand.
And again, we just want to touch on the topic only because we think it's so important to notice the signs and also not to pass down habits or the same expectations.
We call it generational guilt or whatever.
Generational
trauma.
Onto our kids. So I guess first and foremost, I think it's being able to recognize when you're in a toxic relationship with your family. And I always say family is people you choose. So you don't always get to choose your family, like your blood. And so when you are feeling like you're in a negative, toxic relationship, I think it's so important to take a step back and to be able to communicate when you're feeling that you're in a bad situation and why you're feeling that way or what that person has done. And I think
I don't think it's like when you say communicate, it's talk. It's not confrontational. It's, hey, listen. And I think it's reactionary at sometimes. It's, with toxic relationships that you could come back. The initial knee-jerk reaction is to be mad and be...
Or to just brush it under the rug and pretend and let it go.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very common result of
it's
toxic
yes.
behavior. But I think it's also being really smart to know when it's like occasional disputes and conflicts, because that happens obviously in families, but also to know when it's a consistent toxic relationship that's not changing.
Can we get an example of something like that?
Why don't you give an example?
No, I don't know. When you say toxic, it means
I just don't feel, and I know we as parents, we probably are guilty of this, but the guilt tripping or the making children feel bad to get what you want as a parent. And I think, yeah, we do.
I'm guilty of that at times.
When it's happening consistently and it's emotionally manipulating someone, not just a child, it could be anyone, and we're talking parenting, but really we're talking toxic relationships. When you're emotionally manipulating somebody to get what you want, I think the person on the receiving end should speak up or set a boundary. And I think setting boundaries, is the most important thing someone can do is to set that boundary for a healthier relationship. And relationships are a two-way street. It requires mutual respect, whether it's from a parent or a sibling. I think it's important to have respect for each other and to listen to each other and to understand coming from their perspective, be empathetic and compassionate. And I think
But I think, I don't know, yes, it's a two-way street. And I think parents, especially older grandparents, often don't see that gap, and they think, okay, we're still your parents and we get to still tell you what to do, or the expectation is, say, hey, listen, you need to take care of me now,
Okay, I'll use an example. We have someone in our family who is very close to us, and she was sending money back home for her husband, and he would continue to take the money, whatever, she was not making very much, and she was saving, and sometimes it was beyond her means to send, but she would still send, and it was expected of her to send because her husband and his family expected that, and it was her duty, quote unquote, it was her duty to do that.
But because back home they thought, hey, listen, you're in Canada, you make a lot of money, you have this glamorous life, so you should be sending us money.
But then it doesn't stop there. So now, in this example, the husband comes to Canada and doesn't want to work because he's now just been along for the ride, getting money, getting sent to him. But now he's in Canada and his wife is saying he should work, and he's saying no because the expectation is that she would still provide. So that's just a little example of the entitlement, I think, that sometimes comes along with the toxic relationships. And I think the reason we're talking about this is because I think we're surrounded by it more. Like I'm surrounded by it only because I have so many friends who are dealing with it and family members who have the same experiences. I know I mentioned culturally, but I think it's happening outside of the Filipino culture. But I think I can only speak to what we know, and a lot of our friends and family do experience this toxic parenting. Grandparents put an expectation on their children to financially provide, even if it's beyond their means, even if you have young families, even if you have your own bills to pay, you still have to support your parents financially. And I don't know, like maybe I'm missing something. And I think that's a hard thing to say because raising young families is not easy, especially in Toronto when life is expensive.
So it's wild, right? So when I hear these stories, unfortunately, my parents are no longer with us, but like when they were, my parents, they worked really hard to give us a good life. And they continued in their retirement on a fixed income and they saved up a lot, but they continued to take care of me as if I was a kid. Like we would go out to eat and it would be, hey, I would invite them to a restaurant. Hey, and they would pay the bill
They would insist
every time. And we get into arguments like, no, I can do it and don't worry. And it was like, so when I hear these things about the expectation of the parents now expecting their kids to give them money, I'm like, what do you mean? It's such a foreign concept.
Different experience.
But yeah, like when you talk to people about it, there are more and more people who have, and different backgrounds, who have experienced this. And
who is it? The Olympic?
it's Carlos, the Olympic gymnast from the Philippines, who has now estranged from his mother because the mother was using his money to do other stuff, to spend, and without his knowledge. And so he said, you know what? No, like he basically created a boundary. The mother was apparently like not liking his girlfriend of 4 years and had these preconceived notions that, oh no, she's this and that and whatever. And he said, no, you know what? No, you cannot treat her like that. You can't treat me like that. More or less, not, I don't know if he actually cut her out of his life, but he just said, you know what? No, you can't have access to my financial situation as well as, and you can't treat my girlfriend like that.
So I think the bottom line is that I think you have to create boundaries, and it's okay to create boundaries. And I think at first, your family member or parent, they might think they might get mad, and
that is the reaction for sure.
People do create boundaries out of love, and because hopefully on the other side of it is a healthier, more respectful relationship. But yeah, the most important thing is to create the boundary. Be firm and saying no confidently. No is a full sentence.
But know that the boundary is not being selfish. It's a boundary for your own family's safety. And
you're also like mental health, and a toxic relationship, parenting can be really consuming, and it can take a toll on you, and it can impact you as a parent as well. So with that said, I think we're going to get more into this on another episode, but for now, let's just say create the boundary, don't feel bad about it, and hopefully, from that, you
take care of yourself, take care of your family.
You'll have a healthier relationship as a result. Thanks for listening. Hope that wasn't too deep.